Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Cognitive Tennis, and finally, we actually have something to talk about. Before we get into what happened on tour this week, I just wanted to say that the trip video is up. I went up last Tuesday, so if you guys want to check out my trip to France and England, go check that out on my personal channel. That trip was a lot of fun. It was really fun to edit. It's a little bit of a different style. It's more cinematic. Very high energy, so if you guys like that type of style especially and you want to hear about my trip, please check that out. I'll put the link here and in the description as well. As you guys know, the off season hit at the end of November, and finally the season has started again with the new year. So as you guys can imagine, there was a lot happening on tour, so let's get right into it. There were 3 tournaments happening on tour, all 250 tournaments. And let's first talk about Brisbane. Kyrgios is off to a great start this year. After not winning a title in 2017, he took the Brisbane title, beating Ryan Harrison in the final, 6-4, 6-2. Gilles Simon is off to an amazing start this year after having a 16-25 record in 2017 and having not won a title since 2015. He won the title in India after beating Kevin Anderson in the final. And finally, in the 3rd tournament this week, another struggling player, Monfils, won the title in Doha. He beat next-gen Andrei Rublev in straight sets, 6-2, 6-3. So overall on the men's side, amazing comebacks for some players who have had terrible 2017s. So it's amazing to see these players starting to play well again, but we have to keep in mind that this is in the absence of the big 4. Djokovic was scheduled to play in Doha, a tournament that he won last year, so he's the defending champion, and he was unable to compete to defend his title. Nadal was supposed to play Brisbane and pulled out with a knee injury. And Federer was the only one that was healthy this week. He was playing an exhibition at the Hopman Cup. The Hopman Cup is an exhibition tournament where one guy and one girl are selected from the ATP and WTA to represent their country at this tournament. Without going into too much detail, Federer and Bencic won representing Switzerland at the Hopman Cup. But one huge question we have to ask now is, with 3 of the big 4 injured this week, will they be able to play the Australian Open? Because remember, the Australian Open is just around the corner in a week. So let me just briefly update you on each of their statuses heading into the Australian Open. Federer, the oldest of the big 4, has no problems, and he will be at the tournament defending his title. Nadal and Djokovic, at least for now, are scheduled to play an exhibition tournament at the Kooyong Stadium in Australia. Nadal for now is looking good to play the Australian Open, but Djokovic on the other hand has not confirmed that he will play the Australian Open. Djokovic said that he's going to wait until the end of his matches at this exhibition tournament to decide whether he's going to play the Australian Open or not. And finally, Murray. Murray's situation is a little bit more complicated than the others. As far as the Australian Open goes, Murray has officially withdrawn from the Australian Open. And the reason is the same reason he pulled out of the US Open when he was trying to make a comeback last year. He's been struggling with an ongoing hip injury. Murray's looking at the possible options for trying to get back on tour, but from what I understand, it's not looking too great. He's been trying extremely hard to get back on tour. He's tried so much rehab. He knows that surgery is another option. This seems like a very difficult time for Murray, and I'm really hoping that he gets better soon and that his recovery goes well. It's been very tough to see the big 4 getting older, getting more injuries, and not playing as much. And it would be really nice to see them all play at the Grand Slams again and compete at that high level that we've seen for the past decade. So I'm really hoping for a speedy recovery for all of their injuries. But for now, it's looking hopeful that 3 of the big 4 will play the Australian Open. Apart from the Kooyong exhibition, there are 2 other tournaments going on this week in preparation for the Australian Open, and they're both 250 tournaments. Albert Ramos Vignolas, Gilles Muller, Diego Schwartzman, and Fabio Fognini will be highlighting in the Sidney International. And at the other tournament in New Zealand, Jack Sock, Del-Potro, John Isner, and Sam Querrey will be highlighting. Notably missing from all of these tournaments in the last 2 weeks, Nishikori has actually pulled out of the Australian Open, and he still is injured. Nishikori, however, is scheduled to return at the Newport Beach tournament starting the 20th of January. Now onto the ladies' side. There were 2 tournaments happening this week on the ladies' side. There was the tournament in Brisbane and the tournament in Shenzen. Elina Svitolina won the Brisbane title, most notably beating Karolina Pliskova and Jo Konta en route. Konta had to retire mid-match due to injury. Another notable loss, Garbi Muguruza had to retire during her first match of the season with leg cramps. After retiring in the first round of this tournament, Garbi Muguruza changed her plans and she will now play the Sidney International along with US Open champ Sloane Stephens. In the Shenzhen Open, current world number 1 Simona Halep won the tournament after beating 21-year-old Siniakova in the finals. Siniakova is a very streaky player. She beat Sharapova in the semifinals to reach the finals of this tournament. In other news on the women's side, Serena Williams has pulled out of the Australian Open. As you probably heard around the news, Serena Williams had her baby 4 months ago, but due to medical complications, she's unable to compete at 100%. So she's pulled out of the Australian Open this year. Serena will see a dip in her rankings when she comes back on tour, but she is eligible for protected rankings, so when she gets seedings for tournaments that she plays, she will still have a good seeding in those tournaments. We saw the same thing happen with Petra Kvitova after she was attacked in her home and eventually came back on tour. Even though her ranking was low, she was still able to enter tournaments based on what she was previously ranked before the attack happened. The same thing will happen with Serena. So lastly, I just wanted to talk briefly at an overall sense of what I think about all of this stuff happening on tour. There was a lot of stuff happening in these last 2 weeks, but again, a lot of injuries on both the men and women's side. But I'm really hoping that once Indian Wells and Miami hit, since some of these players are taking this time off at the beginning of the year, and we've just had the off season, I'm hoping that everyone will be healthy to play those tournaments and we'll see some good tennis all around. I think it's unfortunate that we won't see all of the big four at the Australian Open. I was really hoping we would see Murray and Djokovic both return for the Australian Open, and it's looking like maybe neither of them will. But I think overall, even with Murray out, this is an exciting time for tennis. Federer is set to defend his title at the Australian Open. Nadal will be playing. Djokovic will probably be playing. And again, remember, Djokovic's ranking will be low heading into the Australian Open, so he will be a dangerous floater in the draw. And that'll make things really interesting because he could end up in Federer's or Nadal's 16th of the draw. Thank you guys for watching. I'll post videos every week updating you on the status of these tournaments. I hope you found this informative and a good catch up for what's been happening on tour a lot in the last 2 weeks. And hopefully, with the Australian Open just around the corner, things will get a lot more interesting. So make sure to subscribe if you want to hear about updates of what's happening on tour. Take care, guys. I'll see you in the next one.